welcome into another edition of the MVFC First and Goal podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Burke, and we continue our series on officiating today. And I'm pleased to be joined by the Director of Officials for the Big Ten Conference, now in his 9th season, Bill Carollo. Bill, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time as you gear up for the really busy time of the year for yourself.
Yeah, a lot of people think it's the busiest time of the year when the games start. And actually, as officials, our busiest time is the off season. So
Really?
We do all of our preparation and all of our training right when the season ends, starting in February after the national championship games. And whether it's the FCS championship game or the FBS national championship, we start our meetings in early February and work about 6 months through and get ready with clinics, camps, etc. But a lot of the work, a lot of the preparation has been done. There's a little bit of fine-tuning right now. There's still some August camps, fall camps going on. But the reality is most of our work is done. So if we're ready, it's because of the work the last 6 months.
Yeah. Your role as Director of Officials, it's a big umbrella. And so what are you overseeing week to week in season? And how does that relate to the Missouri Valley Football Conference?
Well, the Missouri Valley Football Conference is a big part of our consortium. And I say that because to me, it's like the little Big Ten. They have terrific coaches, great teams. The competition, the organization, the structure of the conference is very, very solid. So, and the people that we bring into the Missouri Valley to be officials, I fully expect them to be in the Big Ten or my MAC, my Mid-American Conference, in anywhere from 4 to 6 years. So if they're progressing on track the way we think, if we bring them in, they're going to spend a few years. Now, that's not a good message to give to my coaches in the Missouri Valley because I'm telling them the best people will be leaving you,
Yeah.
right? They want the best people to stay. And we have to give them the right platform, if you will, to get the experience. But once they've earned that right, we're going to give them an opportunity to move forward if they can. And if they don't, they'll end up where they end up. And that usually takes care of itself as far as their performance and so on. So the Valley is not necessarily a proving ground, because I do have other conferences that the D3 conferences that I oversee feed into the Valley. So I constantly want a pipeline coming into the Missouri Valley, which is a real key component. That's their first step into the FBS arena, because they'll be working some MAC and Big Ten games while they're in the Valley. So they'll get tested the first 4 or 5 years. They'll get tested, and we'll know if they can actually work. So what we look for, I would say, is do they have the capability to perform at this college level, Division I level? And then do they have the capacity to continue to improve each year, because the game gets tougher each year? And the third element that I look for is character. Do they have the right character? Are they professional enough to handle the pressure and do the right things? Because the job is really tough for 3 hours on Saturday, but they have to do everything else properly in the off season, during the week, etc., to be on our staff. So it's capability, it's capacity to improve, and character.
Bill, I think it's important to get into your background a little bit. You have a very storied career in officiating. You were an official in the Big Ten and then in the NFL for a long time. And so would you share with us a little bit about your background and how you first got interested in officiating?
Well, it's not unlike a lot of other people's career as far as you evolve. I think most of us thought that we were pretty good athletes and we wanted to play professional football, basketball, baseball, etc. And as you get a little bit older and you compete at the highest levels, whether it's grade school, high school, college, etc., you'll find out that you might not, you might make it to that level, but it's hard to make to the next jump from high school to college, from college to the pros. So my intent was not to be a referee. I had no referees in my family, but I had some very, very good coaches that were referees, and I had some excellent officials that worked my games in high school and college, and they encouraged me to take a risk and step out and be a ref. And I got into officiating at the lowest level, at the grade school level, and you worked your way up. So you'd say, why would anybody want to do that for $4 or $5 a game? Work your way up and get booed by the fans on the sideline, And because I found out it was one of the hardest things I ever did. So it was a challenge for me to see how well or how good I could be in officiating. So I started at the bottom, worked my way up. Wasn't always the greatest. There's always someone better. But you worked really hard, and if you have a passion for it, and you have the right attitude, I think that's important. The motivation is really key in athletics. And I can take an average person, a good B player, and make him an A player.
Yeah.
All based on effort and desire and passion. So, and we're trying to do that same model with regard to my officials. Just because they were a great player doesn't mean they're going to be a great official. But if they're really solid, has the attributes that we look for, and they're working hard, most of the time when people stumble in officiating, it's their self-inflicted wounds. It's that because they didn't work hard enough, they thought they had it, they're a little too cocky, and we try to avoid those pitfalls as we go through our training.
You know, how different is the game now than when you were officiating? Even, I think you retired from officiating maybe in 2008.
Right. I finished the 8th season, finished, I think, an NFL championship in 2009. So that's when I walked off the field. Well, I'd say the biggest difference is that the game has gotten a lot harder. And I didn't leave early, retire early because it was too hard. But it totally has changed. Now let's just stay with football. Football has changed. The athletes are bigger, stronger, faster, and they continue to evolve as a tougher, harder game to officiate. There's just a lot going on on the football field. It's very confusing rule-wise. And you've got 22 players. You don't have 10 players like in basketball. And it's moving pretty quick. So I just think it continues to challenge. So that's why we're spending more time and money in the off-season to train. Because when I started, you got ready a couple months before the season. Now it's a year-round job for our officials. These are college officials. They're independent contractors. They kind of do it on their own. They work for our conferences, my consortium. But the reality is they don't have they have other jobs, and they have a family. And the key, some of our best officials have learned to balance their family life, their real occupation, their job that they have. They might be, a doctor, a lawyer, I worked for IBM for 30 years while I was officiating, and so they have some pretty responsible jobs. Some are teachers and some are, every walk of life. But they have to have the right job to get away at 4 o'clock on a Thursday or Friday afternoon so they can officiate, a grade school game or a high school game, et cetera. And when they work their way up, it might take them 8 or 10 years to get to the college level. Then they realize, boy, this game has changed. So from the time I played, it was a little bit slower. They ran the ball more. They didn't pass as much. They didn't have the spread offenses. They didn't disguise, their defenses as much. And you'd have to be prepared. So I think the biggest thing is football IQ. You have to understand what the coaches are trying to do, not just learn the rule book, but understand the game of football. And that's one of the biggest changes. Besides physically fit, we don't have the old fat guy on the field trying to cover the play and getting beat by 20 yards going in the end zone. We have to have athletes on the field that are officials also, and that's what we look for.
Well said. You officiated 2 Super Bowls, and you were an alternate for a third. How would you describe that experience and where it ranks among the games that you worked?
Well, I think that I worked a lot of big games, and I can't recite every big play or everything like that from every single game. I think a Rose Bowl was a big deal. In my career, I was pretty young. I worked Michigan State and USC, and that was a big challenge. I just thought someday if I could ever get to a Rose Bowl, I'd be at the end of my path, and I've done it, right? I've succeeded. The ultimate goal, I think, for most officials, but I think the biggest and most memorable games are NFL championship games, along with that Rose Bowl. Those are the hardest games. When you get to a Super Bowl, both teams are champions, AFC champion, NFC champion, and they both succeeded in that game. But in the championship game, they want to get to that Super Bowl, and there's a big loser in that game when you lose the championship. And those are tougher games to officiate. And from that standpoint, I think my experiences with championship games are probably my most memorable and toughest. It doesn't mean they're perfect, and because they were memorable, because we had great games, because you always have games and calls, and in the NFL we make about 3 or 4 mistakes a game. Maybe in college at our level, Big Ten, Missouri Valley, we make 5 or 6 mistakes a game. So the game has totally changed. I've had a nice opportunity, and the one reason why I retired was it's such a good path to go from grade school all the way to a Super Bowl, that I wanted to kind of share or train other people and share that experience with them. And I thought I could do more training officials to get to that level, if they're good enough and if they want to put the work in, give them the same experience that I had.
How do you go about grading officials, and what is the percentage of calls on average that they're getting right?
Well, we have a independent staff that grades and evaluates each game, and I have about 26 people from the NFL that are active officials on the field that actually grade and evaluate each game. So I have that, and so I have maybe the best people in the game evaluating and coaching, if you will. Yes, and we evaluate, is the call right or wrong? At the same time, it's good. We're pretty black and white. We're pretty boring people. It's either, I know it's a tough call, but it's either going to be right or wrong. But not only is it right or wrong, were you in the right position? Did you go too quick on the call? Did you throw your flag too fast? You should have slowed down and maybe talked to your teammate on the field, because maybe they had a different angle. You went too quick, made your signal incomplete, out of bounds, and then someone comes in a second and a half later saying, I have a catch. So with that, we look bad. There's indecision, 2 different calls on the field, but they may have some other information. Maybe he didn't hang on to the ball. Maybe his toe was on the sideline, etc. So mechanics is really important. Besides just knowing the rules and having good judgment, being in the right place at the right time is really, really important. And so there's an evaluation process, and there's lots of categories that we go through. We give them rules testing. They have to be physically fit. We give them a Wonderlic test, which is the same as what we do in the NFL.
Oh, wow.
We test them on it's really an IQ test, but we also test them on motivation. There's 5 categories for motivation. So, like I said, I sometimes lean toward a B or B plus player or person, and then high motivation, and I think I get a better combination for an official. If you're a rocket scientist, maybe I'll take the A plus student. And because they're really smart, an engineer that's going to fly my plane to my next game. But the reality is, there's a combination that we look for, skill sets in that. So I think that's important from the standpoint of trying to find the right people.
Bill, what would you say are the biggest rule changes that we'll see this year, and the biggest points of emphasis you're making to coaches and players?
Well, I think that the rule changes are a 2-year cycle. So this year, 2017, an odd year, is an off-season rule changes for us. So what that means is we'll only make changes to rules that have to do with player safety. All right. If there's another rule that we don't like, and going out of bounds, coming back in, recovering a kick, whatever it might be, any other rule, we'll wait till next year. But if it has to do with player safety, we'll make that change this year. So we did make a couple of them this year with regard to player safety. So we've expanded the horse collar tackle. So we put it in about 8 or 9 years ago. We said you couldn't grab the inside of your collar from behind or the side and drag you down and buckle your knees and drop your weight in the back, because it's going to lead to a knee injury for the runner. So we did that, but now we've expanded it. Your hand doesn't have to go inside the collar or the shoulder pad. You can grab the nameplate area just above the numbers from behind. If you do that and do all the other the definitions of a horse collar, grabbing, snatching it down, and dropping your weight on the back of his legs, that will be a foul. So we've expanded that to protect the runner a little bit more. And the other one was running forward on extra points and field goals. We're not going to allow a person who is that's in the second level, which is the linebacker level, and run forward and leap and jump to try to block a kick.
Okay.
All right. So, and not a punt, but just extra points and field goals. We're going to prevent that. And really what happens when the player's in the air, they get cut and they get turned on their head and they land on their head. And we've had some injuries along that way. So we've made that change. And of course, the pads and the knee pad, we want the knees covered just to protect them a little bit. And that will go into effect We made that rule change. We don't want shorts out there. We want the legs, the knees covered with a pad in there. We put that in there too. So those are the two rule changes along with the knee pads. But maybe the most important thing that people should continue to look at is targeting. And high hits with force above the shoulders, or a player doesn't have to be a high hit, doesn't have to be a defenseless player, using the crown of his helmet. When he drops his head and goes forward, if he doesn't see his target on the tackle or the block, he's going to hurt his own neck and create problems for himself from a safety standpoint. So that will continue to be our number one focus, player safety, and in particular the targeting call, which means if we do call it, we do send it to replay at every level of Division I. And then if it is a targeting call, they're out for the rest of the game. And if it's the second half, they're out for the next game. So that's a very penalized play that we want to make sure we get right, and that's why we use replay with that.
Would you say from an officiating perspective, is targeting, is that what you'd consider the biggest threat right now to player safety?
I think it's the biggest threat for player safety. We keep expanding who's a defenseless player, but clearly the biggest threat, not just for player safety, but also for our game. If we don't get these rules get it right when it comes to player safety, we won't have a game. We won't have a game that we know it today. I mean, 25 years from now, I don't know what it will be, but it might be closer to rugby. Something, we might not have face masks. We might not need helmets. And it may be a totally different game. The rules committee and the people involved in football don't want that. So that's why we keep changing and changing their safety rules every single year. And not that it's a money thing and we don't have football or something to look at on Saturday. It's because we found, and research is starting to prove, that these hits, these continual hits and these big hits to the head area causes a lot of trauma, and CTE is a problem with regard to player safety, especially in football. And the researchers are doing it. The Big Ten is doing some research with the Ivy League, and of course the NFL is doing it. And there's a lot of money being poured in this area.
I was watching your presentation at the Big Ten Media Days this year. You mentioned that the Big Ten is going to now have 8 officials on the field. How many officials does the Missouri Valley Football Conference utilize during, a typical game, and how much of a difference do you feel like that 8th official on the field makes?
Well, we went to 8 officials recently, and I was a big proponent of that because your first question had to do with how has the game changed? They're faster, they spread the field more, and if you're just running between the hash marks and handing off the ball when I was playing or when I started officiating, it was pretty easy just to cover a run. Now everyone's involved all over the field. So the 8th official, actually, if you want better officiating, you want less plays missed, missed calls, no calls, the 8th official has helped tremendously. And we also put it in for player safety, just for the blind side, the back side. We have one extra player out there looking. Before we had 2 players looking at all the linemen, all the backs in the backfield, in the tackle box area. And this gives us more of a triangle between the umpire, center judge, and referee. So number one, it was coverage that really helped us a lot. The Missouri Valley right now only has 7 officials, and we would like to have 8, although it's a cost factor, a budget factor for the universities with the athletic directors and their budgets. We know that we can improve officiating to an X degree, but it also costs money, right? Just like replay cost us money to put in replay at the Missouri Valley level. But now with all the games on television, I know that you're a part of that, and these targeting calls and these 1 or 2 plays a game that really needs some extra scrutiny, because the human eye can only see a few frames per second. You slow it down, or 20 frames a second, and the slow motion slows it down to 2 or 3 frames per second. It makes a big difference. I mean, we just aren't capable sometimes seeing the receiver dotting the I with his toe on the sideline with kicking up a couple pebbles on the turf. So it really has helped the game. So technology has helped the game. The 8th official has helped the game. But it costs money, and I opted to go with the replay felt that replay would be more important at this time than the eighth official. But ultimately, we'll probably get to that. We're not pushing it, and I'm kind of waiting to the point that we can justify it. And once we can justify it, we'll go to eight officials.
Well, and I'm sure it'll help too now. When you see what the Big Ten does with it this year, that you can take a physical product back and say, hey, this is how it enhanced, what we're doing.
Exactly. So we have the data on how many fouls, and I didn't want to have the eighth official there and just to create more fouls in the game. I just don't want to miss some critical fouls, some critical unsportsmanlike or unnecessary roughness calls that we were missing. So I think we have better coverage, and we're starting to gather the data. And then that will, the data, it's always when you want to make a rule change or add an extra official, show me the data. What is it going to solve? We said, let's not have low blocks on kickoffs because it's dangerous. The coaches said, well, show me the data. How many injuries? But then we showed them the data. Kickoffs are probably our most dangerous play. Everyone's running full speed, different directions, low blocks, cut blocks, breaking up the wedge, going at that full speed is dangerous. And that proved it. So that's why we made some rule changes. So likewise, we'll see the data come in, and the eighth official might get a few more legs to run with at the Missouri Valley level.
Yeah. My conversation with Bill continues shortly, but if you're enjoying this edition of the MVFC First and Goal podcast, check out all the Lineup Media Group offerings featuring your favorite sports and non-sports podcasts too. Now back to the show. Bill, I think most people would be surprised to learn that officials spend about 50% of their time in training. And you even alluded to it a little bit in the beginning of our chat, just how busy the off season is. And that's where a lot of the preparation and work goes in before you even start the season. But what kind of preparation are the officials doing even during the week?
Well, during the week, they're looking, once the season starts, they finish their games on Saturday, and I begin my conference calls with all the head referees starting on Sunday. What happened in your game at North Dakota State against Northern Iowa, et cetera. And we watch all the games in the command center, which is a big help. But if I have a few questions, and if I don't call them right after the game or the Sunday morning, we'll have a conference call. And really, to that, I know most things that happen when they happen live is of television. But the benefit to the conference calls on Sunday with the head referees, everyone shares what happened in their game. This is what happened with this player. This is what happened with this coach in this situation. Or we had a very unusual rule enforcement, or we had a really screwed up play, and we could have handled it differently. And from that standpoint, it helps the other officials, so their crew, next time they have that team or next time they have that situation, they won't make the same mistake. So we do that on Sunday. So they're quickly looking, and they start their own self-evaluation on Sunday because they have all the video. So the officials all can look at their own game, critique it, put it into the system, make comments. I called pass interference because, and that's what they do on every single call. I did not throw the flag because I didn't think it materially restricted this player. There was contact, but he was playing the ball, no foul. And they have to justify what they did or didn't do. And then someone on Monday come in, the NFL evaluators, and they look at all their plays in the entire game. Let's say it's 180 some plays, and they see if they're putting down exactly what happened on the play, or they saw it one way, and maybe the evaluator says, well, this is not enough. He does grab his jersey, but he ran right through it. We don't want that called on every single play. It's too technical. So they go through that, and they worry about their grades. So just like you're taking a test, they want to have a perfect game, and there's never been such a thing as a perfect game. We all make mistakes. We could have done it just a little bit better, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a television show that you're doing, or performance on the field. A player, coach, or official never been perfect. And I always say that there's only two things perfect in life, and it's your mother and it's your maker. Other than that, we all make a lot of mistakes. So they start looking at their video on Sunday, have a conference call, get the games are being evaluated on Mondays, and then by Tuesday, all the games are graded, and then I circle back on Wednesday morning and kind of do a debrief from last week's game. We had, of all the conferences that we have. I go through, I don't go through every play in every game, but in general, at a high level, I talk about, we had a pretty good weekend last week, a couple things we want to tighten up on. These are the types of plays I want you to look at this week. I want to make sure that we're really, focused in on the points of emphasis, player safety. One of the things that I did not mention, because it's not a rule change, but it's a point of emphasis, is the coaches coming out on the field to complain about a call. Similar to basketball, there's a box there. And if you go outside the box and complain about a block charge, you will get a technical foul in basketball. It's pretty clear.
Yeah.
You can say a lot of things. You can't say the magic words, just because you're in the box. But, you can say a lot of things if you stay in the box. You can't come on the floor. Same in football now. And we had the same rule. We just allowed them to step on the field on a dead ball, and we'd walk them back to the sideline, and I'll get the head referee to come over and talk to you, and et cetera. And the reality is we're tightening that up because what we allowed some of these coaches to do, we would never allow a player to do, and they're the adults on the field, right? So we're going to tighten it up. So we went to all the coaches, showed them a video. These are going to be fouls starting this fall. So that's a points of emphasis. And the commissioners were there, all the head coaches were there, and so were the coaches' bosses, the athletic directors. So everybody knows, point of emphasis, we're going to tighten this up. We're not going to let you get away with trying to show up the officials if they're challenging and they're on the field. So those two things have to happen. They can't come on the field to challenge a call. And that will be a flag, 15-yard penalty. If you get two of them, Kelly, you're out of the game. The head coach is out of the game. We just put that rule in last year. It was the only sport in college that you could not throw the head coach out, which seems ridiculous. But we never had that, in there, and now we have it in there that you get two unsportsmanlike conduct fouls, and you'll be kicked out of the game. For the coach. So that's a big deal if you lose the head coach in a football game.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully we get that and we do it consistently throughout the season. So the points of emphasis are always important for us to make sure that so when we go to these teams, and that's something that I'd say, guys, we said, and gals, and it might be of interest to your followers and your listeners, is that we have more than 6 or 7 female officials that are working Division I football that are on our staff. And we'll have our first female head referee work some Big Ten games, and she'll have her own Mid-American conference, and we have multiple ones work in Valley. So, and the coaches know it, and this is not a gimmick. They've earned it, and I'm proud of that we can identify and train and get them to the level. Some of them have even played football, but not all of them have played tackle football. So, and that's a nice opportunity. If you played a little bit, it does help. Doesn't guarantee you're going to be a great referee, but at least you're familiar with some of the things that goes on during a football game. Most people watch it and it's like, I'm not sure what they're doing. There's who's doing what. Oh, that's a trap play. They're trying to lure this player in and block them, double team them, whatever it might be. And if you played a little bit, sometimes that helps. That's that football IQ that we talked about.
Yeah. Bill, pace of play is always a concern right now. And so how does video review and video replay fit into that equation of not making the games too long?
Well, we average about 1.8, just under 2 stoppages per game for replay. But pace of play is important. So you'll see a little bit more of an emphasis in this area, pace of play, with regard to getting the ball in play. After the play is over, we're going to be a little more efficient as officials. And like 20-minute halftime is going to be 20-minute halftime. We're going to set the clock, clear the field, and wind it. And then we're going to try to get the players out there. So it's not going to be 22, 23 minutes. And we're going to try to take a few minutes off the game. Because we've trended since 2010, the last 7 years, we've gone from 3 hours and 10 minutes to 3 hours and 24 minutes. So in FBS. So we've added 14 minutes to that game. Missouri Valley is a little bit less in FCS as far as average time. In the Valley, we only average 3 hours and 16 minutes. But we're still going to be as efficient as possible. So when the ball is dead, the clock's not running, we're going to try to get the ball in, put the ball down, get the teams out of their huddles and timeouts. We aren't going to let them milk it, if you will, a little bit longer. If it's a 30-second timeout, it's a 30-second timeout. If it's a 1-minute timeout, so we're going to be a little stricter in those areas. So pace of play is important, and you'll see a few rule changes we put in when we went out of bounds. Instead of stopping the clock and waiting to the next snap, we put the ball down and then wind the clock. So those are all good things that we're trying to do to keep the game moving, to keep the fans happy, to keep everybody at home or in the stadium engaged on the game. So pace of play, along with, the coaches know it, they like it. And in some stadiums, you'll see in the Mid-American Conference and the Big Ten, you will see like a shot clock during dead ball periods, counting down the timeouts, whether it's not just the halftime clock, but, during timeouts, we're going to experiment with that for the NCAA to see if we can get everybody moving. The coaches know it. They don't have to ask, is TV back? Or, should we finish our huddle? They can see a clock in their stadium, and they can be ready to go when we're ready.
Okay. You briefly touched on it, and it's one thing that I talked, extensively with Tony Byniski about is the Big Ten Command Center on a typical Saturday. And so he talked about, what his role is in that room on a Saturday. But I'm curious, what your role is on a typical college football Saturday in that Big Ten Command Center.
Well, Tony's in there, and Tony and his team are manning all the games. We're bringing the games in from every location that we have a game that day that our officials are officiating. And then I'm always there on a Saturday, and sometimes the commissioner will be there, and some other people, staff people, some people monitoring social media, seeing what the fans are saying about a game and see if we have an issue there. But I'm there to be available for the media, so the media can call me during the game and say, we don't understand why that play was handled this way. And I will explain what the rule is. I may not give them my opinion immediately on a judgment call, because I evaluate it. I let my NFL people evaluate it. We need to look at multiple angles, but sometimes TV has one angle and they say, how could he overturn that call to a touchdown, the winning touchdown? But I'd have to see what film that they used in the replay booth to overturn that call. So, but being available to the media is important to answer questions for that. Sometimes, administrator might call me and they have a problem, they have a question, a concern, because there's it could be anything that they have a power outage to a threat to the stadium, to something happened. Maybe it's a weather delay, lightning in the area. We'd like to delay the game. We'd like to clear the field. We'd like to clear the stands. It's going to be, how long do we have to wait before we can resume it? So those are the types of questions that would come in. And we have some guidelines for that. Each conference has the guidelines with weather, let's say, for lightning and so on. So we get a lot of help, but it's a coordinated effort, and the command center is kind of the pulse of our conferences. And so every game is being captured there, it's reviewed there. If there's a replay, if there's a targeting, if there's a coaching incident, if there's an unusual play, I might ask Tony and his team to mark that play, that'll be a good one for training tape. Let's mark that play. I know I'm going to get a phone call by the media, or the phone's ringing now, let's take that call. And then if I have to, I have a studio in our office. In my office in the command center, I don't have to be at the Big Ten Network or at ESPN. I can just jump on and videotape a response, and that can go live on TV when it happens. So I don't do it too often, but I may pick up the phone and answer their questions, and they give them a clarification on why we handled something a certain way. So I'm pretty busy, so we start early in the morning. The games start at 11 and goes to about 11 or 12 at night. So it's about a 12-hour day there, and we see a lot of games. Sometimes we might have 27, 28 games on a Saturday. There's a lot of games coming in. When you start calculating, you have 28 games times 180 plays on the average. A lot of things can go wrong. So we see a lot of mistakes. We see a lot of great officiating too. And I can come out of there and then, call the commissioner on Sunday morning and say, we had a pretty good day. Patty, the commissioner, Patty Viverito, for the Missouri Valley, she'll know, we had a rough day on pass interference. We had a good day on targeting. We had this or that. This coach was on the field. We had to flag him. So we have a pretty good communication and network between the games, the command center, and then the appropriate people, meaning the commissioners, the athletic directors, or follow up with the coaches after the game.
Yeah. Bill, what do you feel like is the biggest misconception about officials?
The biggest misconception of officials, I would say most people think it's a pretty easy job until if you have children and we're looking at a kid's soccer game and someone doesn't show up, and they'll ask them, why don't you go out there and be the referee or be the linesman, and you decide if it's going to be offsides in soccer. Most of them can't do it. It's a lot harder. As simple as it looks, who hit the ball, who touched the ball last in basketball before out of bounds. It happens way faster than people think. And so I think it's harder than most people realize. If you ever had the opportunity to try it under pressure, even at a grade school level, they'll go, wow, I don't want to do that. I'm going to get yelled at before I even start, And so that's one thing. And the other thing is they'd be surprised how much work it takes to be a referee. If you calculate how much you get paid per hour, it's not for the 3-hour game. They might put in, depending on what level, Kelly, it could be anywhere from 15 to 30 hours a week extra just to work that 3-hour game. And the effort, most people say, for that kind of money, I don't want to do it. So you have to find the right person, the right character, the right intangibles that are thick-skinned, that understand it, and that really want to do the right thing, the fair thing. And acknowledge, when you make a mistake, acknowledge, Coach, if the quarterback got hit in the head, then I must have missed it. I thought he hit him in the shoulder. I had a pretty good look at it. We're going to really tighten this up. I'll keep a closer eye on this. So you've got to admit your mistakes, have really good interpersonal skills, communication skills. But most people would be surprised the amount of work it goes into it and how hard it is.
Bill, do you miss being actually on the field, working a game anymore? And what do you enjoy most about your current role?
Well, I think, when it comes around to playoff times and big games, I kind of miss that adrenaline, the pressure, the nervousness, the uneasiness going into a huge game, just to see how good I could really be. So that's the challenge. It's like playing golf, or can I break 80? Can I do this? Can I shoot par? And that challenge is what motivates me. So I missed that a little bit, but it was my decision to retire early after 20-some years with the NFL. And I thought the challenge of training and helping other people in this unpopular profession of, like, who wants to be a referee? Why would you want to walk out there, and get booed before, as you come out with these funny stripes on and walk out in the field? Why would you want to do that? I mean, what's wrong with you? And because I did it a couple of times, I thought, boy, this is really hard. So the challenge of trying to be respected in this profession, which isn't always the case. You're not always, because fans look at their teams and their players and their little Johnny or Susie on the field or whatever, whoever it might be, just from their perspective, their team, their kid playing. And they don't look at it like, well, yeah, but here's the rule. And they apply the rule properly. And yes, you're going to get a penalty. And yes, it's not a touchdown. They won't like it. And they can't quite accept that, And so I think it's something that wasn't early on in my career. I wanted to be an athlete and continue, and I wanted to go into business. So I did all those things. But now that I've left the field, I missed maybe that action on a championship game, but I really enjoy, we've got some big games coming up the first weekend of the season. That's action for me, to see how good my officials can do under the biggest stage, under a lot of pressure. And we know they're human. It's the first game of the year, and we've got guys working major games on the first weekend that will actually help decide the national championship. Who's going to go on to, 4 months from now, into the FBS championship or the FCS championship. So my job is to try to train them and get the best out of them, motivate them, make them work hard. And they're independent contractors. They're part-time workers, if you will. And as it turned out, when I started, I was a part-time official. Today, these officials, even though they have a family, even though they have a regular job, an occupation, a profession, they also have 1/3 of their life dedicated to officiating. And they work their tail off to be the best that they can be. But I get excited when I see my officials out there working and see the hard work they put into it, and it pays off. Because I can see it. Maybe the average fan doesn't see it, but I know exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it. or they're indecisive. No, they're getting together. They're trying to get it right. And that's our ultimate goal. We talk about being graded and evaluated and having some accountability, but in essence, when we actually throw the flag, and we have all the numbers on that, when we actually throw the flag, we're correct about 96% of the time, 96.5% when we throw the flag. But when I look at the total evaluation, sometimes when we don't throw the flag and we should have, or we're out of position mechanically, and we got beat to the goal line by the player, et cetera. There's other things we look at. Misapplied a rule, went 9 yards or 9.5 yards, and it was a 10-yard penalty. All those things that most fans don't see, all those little errors. But when we do the entire evaluation, we're correct about 94% of the time. So when we factor in everything, so around 93% of the time we're correct on the field. So that's a pretty good accuracy. And when you take a look at, federal judges, or local judges, and they get their rulings appealed and overturned, that's a higher rate of accuracy than an appeals circuit court, as far as at being right 93% of the time. So I'm kind of proud of what we do there. We work really hard at that. We know we're going to continue to make mistakes and if we don't have replay and it's not reviewable and it's a judgment call and we look at it, my evaluators say, we would prefer this to be called. You should have thrown the flag on that play. So it's in the eyes of the beholder and your background, and we're trying to do what's right based on the rules, the interpretations, the points of emphasis, and the coaches know it's a pretty hard job.
Yeah. Bill, you have 4 children, and you'll have to share if you have any grandchildren yet, but officiating in general, it's such a serious job, and as you said earlier, it can be a thankless job at times, but how does your family, kind of help you keep everything in perspective?
Well, the family keeps me balanced, I think. And when I was on the field, they were proud of me until I turned the microphone on. I misspoke or confused which team and pointed the wrong direction, and they get all really embarrassed. So they like it when everything goes well. When it doesn't go so well, and I've had, some very controversial NFC championship games going back several years where there's death threats and catch, no catch, and that big controversy that still lingers today, 15 years ago in a game. And between myself and my replay person, Jerry Markbright, who's a long time, 50-plus years in the NFL, he was my replay guy at the time, and we overturned a call, and it was Bertie Manuel's catch, and we said it was incomplete, and it was done technically correct, but next year, what did they do? They changed the rule. They said, okay, now the ball can touch the ground. And so they make changes to that. So there's always been a lot of pressure, but my family's been involved, and they get a little embarrassed when things don't go as well as I'd like them to go. But I would say that they're very supportive. They're very proud of their dad. And they probably were disappointed when I retired early from the NFL. But they know this was my passion, to try to help other officials. And you try to be successful at one level. And if you can do something else and reinvent yourself, I wasn't a teacher. I'm not trained in this area to be a great teacher. That wasn't my background. I was a business guy. And but I think, that's what I wanted to do. Life's short, and it's just one more challenge you look at and say, what, I think I'd like to try to do that. I want how good I really can be, and kind of reinvent yourself for that. And I could have stayed in the field at least 10 more years, but I just felt this was my mission, this was my goal, and I did that. So the family's been really good. They still want free tickets, and it's been really good from the family.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you feel like is important to share?
Oh boy, you've done a terrific job, Kelly, in trying to draw out the blind side of officiating, the people that don't see it. That you see a call and you see a replay and you see an announcer's opinion on that. But I guess the biggest thing is the human element. These guys and these gals that are officials, and the gals are blazing new ground, in my opinion, when we have the first, female head referee at the Big Ten level. That's a big deal. Yeah. And I wouldn't put my reputation or her reputation or anybody's, the conference reputation, unless they're qualified to do that. But I think that, the opportunity is there if people want to do it. Most people have an opinion on it, and they find out it's a lot harder than they think, and they don't want to do it. So it's hard to bring people into our profession. But I think the human side of officiating is the one thing that I'd like to have you underscore, that these are really people. They have lives. They don't need death threats on a game because a call didn't go right, even if it was wrong. Mm-hmm. There's 180 some plays that we could have gotten right to change the outcome of the game. And I'm not minimizing mistakes. I mean, it's a tragedy if we make a mistake and it causes a team to lose. But usually it isn't one play; it's multiple plays, that happen in a game. But these are real people that try to work really hard at what they do, and you need them in the game. And they'll always be around, and I'm sure there'll always be controversy around who is the referee, in that game.
Well, Bill, this has been a real pleasure, and I really appreciate you carving out time today to chat with me. And I feel like I'm walking away from this with so much even more knowledge, about officiating in general, and video review and video replay. And for all the listeners and viewers out there, I'm sure they're going to do the same.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. I really appreciate your professionalism and your true interest in officiating and trying to make the game better. And I want to wish you and your team good luck for this season.
Thank you so much. Well, if you like what you heard from Bill Carollo and our MVFC First and Goal podcast, take a moment and subscribe. lineupmedia.fm also is home to many other podcasts, shows like You're on the Clock, the Cowboys podcast, and the Blues NHL podcast are just some of the options. You can also find us on iTunes and Stitcher.